All right. Well, welcome everyone to FCI Live. My name is Faye Mack. I'm the new-ish executive director here at FCI Live, and I'm really happy to be here with you all tonight and to see you. I am going to share my screen so I can introduce our speaker this evening. All right. Just adjust here to see everybody. All right, excellent. Well, as I said, my name is Faye Mack. I am the executive director at FCI, and I'm really happy to welcome you to the second session of FCI Live Summer Series. And we are here tonight to talk about governance in times of transition. And we are here with Kate Sassy Sassoon. And I will let Kate introduce herself in just a moment after I give a couple of housekeeping tips for the evening. So as we get going, as you know, this session is being recorded. All of our sessions for FCI Live are recorded, and then the videos are posted on our YouTube page and resource page for folks to access later on. And those will all be posted by July 3rd. So we have, I believe, about 16 live webinars happening this week and next week. So if there are any that you're excited about and can't attend, you'll be able to access those later online. And as a registered attendee, you'll receive an email when those become available. So you can check this one out again later as well. We ask that you mute yourself when you're not speaking, just to prevent background noise and sound quality issues. And then this session is going to be really interactive. We're going to break out into breakout rooms and have some really good discussion. So Sassy will be taking Q&A throughout in different moments. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll go ahead and take those as they come, and perhaps ask you to hold them for the breakout room if they're really good, juicy questions to talk about with your small group. So we'll do that, and I will thank our sponsors. So we have a great number of sponsors here tonight. We're really happy to have that support, and in particular are glad to have National Co-op Grocers as our champion sponsor. So thank you to them and to all the others who've made this possible. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Kate and stop sharing.
Yay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Can someone give me a wave of your fingers or a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? Yay, hi. Oh, hello. Hello, friends. Lovely to meet. I feel like I actually am for the first time in a while in a room of awesome co-opers where I don't know half the people. This is awesome. New comrades to build and share and grow with. How fantastic. So I'm Kate or Sassy, whichever y'all prefer. I've just dropped into the chat our agenda and shared collaborative notes document for today. I don't do slides, because I like people to be able to kind of listen with their eyes closed. We don't get enough time to rest in our culture, generally speaking, or follow along in explicit detail of like, what are we actually talking about? How are we getting into it? Because, Principle 6, cooperation among cooperatives, and Principle 5, education, we're all here for it. So that's kind of, I've dropped that in. A reiteration for those folks just joining us. Hi, welcome. We're going to talk about governance. Make sure you're muted when you're not talking, but jump in the chat and also verbally if and when we ask. Going to be really collaborative. We're going to have a lot of conversation, and we're just going to dig in. So really briefly, who the heck am I and why the heck am I here talking to y'all? My name is, again, Kate or Sassy. I'm a lifelong co-opper. I'm actually what some of my friends call a co-op native. I grew up in housing cooperatives, worker cooperatives, been a member of several different food co-ops, as well as artist collectives, and I already mentioned housing co-ops, I think, but daycare co-ops as well. So I've been around this stuff from specifically a multi-sector perspective. I also am currently a member of a multi-stakeholders cooperative startup. So I've been in the trenches with getting things going. And there's some particular challenges and around the starting up and the transitioning phases, especially around governance. And what I do these days when I'm not helping grow a co-op from the inside is I go around to different co-ops through my business, Sassy Facilitation, helping co-ops cooperate in various ways. And I have a particular bias or love of governance, especially when you're talking about how are we gonna start, maintain, grow, and elaborate and evolve our cooperative shared assets. which is in this case, a grocery cooperative or a shared cooperative enterprise in the grocery field. So it's pretty fun and pretty interesting. And that's kind of what we're going to dig into today. But before we do that, I want to know, thank you to folks who are already chiming in on the chat. I'm going to give you all a prompt, and I'm going to be excited if you can put it in the chat. I would love to hear everybody's voices normally, but we've got a condensed, a light time together. So we're going to do as much double duty as we can. So if I could ask you, if you would share your name, whatever your pronouns are, what co-op you're coming from, and where you're at in your growth phase. And then also the answer to the question, if you could, would you have the superpower of telekinesis or invisibility? Would you like to be able to move objects with your mind, or would you like to become invisible? And however you want to interpret those superpowers are yours. Go ahead, and then go ahead and share that in the chat for me. I'll share mine. Again, Kate or Sassy, she, they, currently a member of Zebras Unite, as a multi-stakeholder enterprise. And I would have, I think I would have telekinesis, because imagine how fast organizing would be if you could just stand in one place and stock every shelf in the exact right way. I think that would be incredible. I don't have a grocery co-op, but I'm a part of an artist collective right now, and the stock is just always getting out of order, and it would be magical to be able to do that. So thank you to folks who are jumping in. Jason's already rocking the power of invisibility. I want to know more. Other folks chiming in, telekinesis. Lots of great co-ops in the room too. Awesome. Thank you for that. Keep it going. We're going to jump in, but I want to know more. I want to know more from all of you. So let me just make sure that I can see your glorious faces and also my notes. Faye, if you wouldn't mind, for folks who joined after I dropped in the collaborative agenda doc, maybe just drop it in again so that folks can see it and that I can make sure they know where to put their wisdom when we get to it. And again, if folks can mute when they're not chatting, fantastic. All right. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about what is a time of transition and uncertainty, and how is that, where and how may that implicate governance specifically. We'll talk about some tools that can help you navigate that. And then we're going to break into some groups and pick a context, pick a tool, and think through how we might actually apply that in our own cooperatives together. And, or, you know, what maybe you already have a context or a situation that you could use a little bit of debriefing or a little bit of a collaborative thinking about for your, in this room of your peers learning. So we'll get into that. So that's kind of the arc of our time. We're going to spend, you know, about equal time on each of those things to make sure that we've got some space for learning and some discussion. But to kind of jump right in, I'd love to hear some of your voices, either literally or feel free to put it in the chat if you're not in a place where you can take yourself off mute. But let's share some examples of what do y'all think I mean, and what do you mean by times of transition and uncertainty? Like, what might be an example in your development process or in the creation of a food cooperative? Feel free to raise an appendage or just jump off of mute. You can use a physical appendage or one of the little Zoom icons. I'm personally partial to the cephalopods. Margot, do I see you? Yeah, bring it. What you got? Give me an example of the time of
We're
uncertainty.
just starting up. So we're
Okay.
in transition because we had this idea. Now we're trying to gather everything. It's a huge project. So that's transition.
Yeah,
We're
you're
just
being
trying to
birthed.
figure it out.
You're birthing yourselves. That's a big
Yeah.
transition. From
Thank
nothing
you.
to something. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, love it. Thanks, Margot. Sheila, what you got?
A volatile board that ends up making bad accusations and becoming part of the board to set the co-op on fire and watch it burn. Then everyone quits, and then we have to rebuild. We are rebuilding. Some of you guys know this story. I think that's here. I recognize a few names, but yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we've got birth. We have a little bit of maybe rebirth,
Yeah.
or some and a volatile board. I want to pull out of its own particular context. I think that's also another one that I hear there. That's real common. And other things about the state or status of the board might be other flavors of times of transition and uncertainty. Mary, what you got?
We've been organizing for 11 years, and we're going to open the store in July of this year. So we've been doing it all without a physical place, without having a general manager. For the last 6 months, we've had a general manager. So we're trying to figure out how to share power and how to keep the grassrootsy part, but also make the store actually economically viable.
Yeah, so you're moving from idea to reality in a very tangible way, right? And you're like literally transforming into from idea to budget line item. Yeah, all right. Love it. I'm seeing some wonderful things in the chat that I'm just going to uplift, but if you've got another one or two for me, put your hands up. Someone looking to retire and the board needing to face that fact. And letting them retire, which I resonate with. I've been there. Moving from a working board to a GM, right? So moving from a collective, pushing it forward to a staff person that the board will then need to move to overseeing. It's a very big change in both operations and governance. Choosing location, size, programming, right? Making the details of a manifestation of the real. Excellent. Okay, good stuff. Good folks. Anything else? I heard some really great stuff, and I want to move us into thinking about governance, right? How does these things specifically implicate governance? So for example, if you're moving from a working board to a GM, that has some pretty clear implications for governance, right? Literally the body of people that are going to be making what kinds of decisions is about to change and kind of have to be rewritten together, right? But what are some other things? Are there any other challenges that may implicate how you govern, or how you kind of constellate yourselves and how you decide what direction you're going, how it's going to be? Anything else you want to toss in before I dig into some themes? Okay, yeah, Tip Top owners of 20 years are retiring and moving to a new membership structure. So this is not a startup. You have a thriving and stable business, 2 decades long, but there are some big changes inside that body of membership coming. And with those changes come an opportunity, right? I like to call these natural moments of transition. You've already paid for the transition. You're going to have to deal with any of the, transfers of institutional knowledge, transfers of relationship, all of the other kinds of things that might be going on. You might as well use it to tune it up, make it new. But that's definitely a time of uncertainty. All right. Taboo. Let me pull out some themes from kind of common challenges that implicate governance in a lot of these different examples and some other ones that I've seen in different flavors of co-ops starting up, especially going from, co-ops. I'm pulling examples from co-ops that are have a retail component and have a physical component. Those are the kind of really important things in terms of some of the ways that your kind of co-op is similar to many of the other kinds of co-op out there in the world that I've seen and worked with. So there's kind of, I like to think of this kind of the who, what, how, when, and why themes of what changes when things are, what challenges are common to these examples. We have who is in charge, may be really unclear, right? Where does the ultimate decision authority lie? It might be in flux while you literally have to make decisions. And if folks disagree about who to decide, things can either grind to a halt or blow up in your face. And if you don't have a common set of those agreements in a way that everybody agrees is an agreement, that can be really sticky, especially if things are moving rapidly. So we move to the what we are actually doing together may be unclear. There's, as many of you know, and as we've just heard some wonderful examples of, there can be a lot of hurry up and wait in developing a food co-op. And that can create space for the visions that the different stakeholders are holding and the priorities that they're acting with and using to drive their time. They may drift apart in your core group or in your staff, right? How you go about things may become unclear, right? So the order of operations in which you are doing the project, or even the entire project plan, may need to change when kind of unknown unknowns are discovered, or when contexts change. Right. So exactly how you're doing things is a really common challenge in terms of how how do we decide what order do we do things in, etc. When may also become a moving target, right? So timelines and deadlines may sometimes shift rapidly, which can have kind of lots of effects, but two big ones, which is sometimes then like arduously reached community-driven, consensed upon decisions can suddenly become obsolete. And the ability to decide very rapidly may suddenly become critical. And those can be really hard things to narrow in on in an already existing time of uncertainty. And then why you're doing this, that may evolve, right? So as the project stretches, the people pushing that project forward and the goals that they hold may change, or the context that you're building in may shift in a way that kind of moves your mission and values or moves how you set about achieving them, right? And this is true for literally every moment of your organization, from startup to century organization to, you know, if and when you decide that it should not be an organization anymore. So all of those things, those are kind of the ways I think about, all right, if there's a challenge that's happening, if we're in a time of uncertainty or in a time of transition, here are some ways that I can think about the different components that may be up for grabs, or maybe a question in how we're trying to navigate this. So for me, that's a way to kind of clarify thinking a little bit when I'm trying to say, okay, you know, here we are, we're in a startup organization and we need to make some decisions about how we're going to take our idea into reality. You know, when is going to be something that's it's kind of out there pretty far, but it may get really short if a loan shows up, or or if a store shows up that's perfect, a physical plant. So we should have a plan for the when. How do we narrow in on a when rapidly when we have the structure that we're in? So that's an example of how I use that kind of thinking to just kind of pull out some themes from what the time of uncertainty or transition may be telling us, or what your specific context may be telling you. Does that all kind of make sense? Any other clarifying questions, or like everything you want to toss into the mix before we move on to thinking through what tools you can use to kind of start to navigate those a bit? Yeah, oh, I see a thumbs up. I love a thumbs up. I don't like to take silence as like yes, but if folks are feeling good, I'm here for it. Okay, great, cool. All right, so let's talk about tools. So challenges, there's a lot of them. One I didn't hear explicitly, but as some folks raised to me before we chatted here is, for example, when a GM joins your core, like a GM comes on and the store is in the middle of being built. Not, you know, you're not approving, but you actually have started to lay ground. You've started to break ground. You've started to put up sticks. And the GM comes in, and maybe there's if there was going to be a disagreement about strategy or physical layout, that would be a really awkward moment to have it, right? So that's what I like to think about when I'm thinking about what kind of tools do I need to help a group that I'm in or that I'm supporting be set up to navigate times of transition more successfully than not. I'm trying to think of like, what's the worst thing that could happen right now? And then make a design that's not going to account for all of those, but that's going to at least guide us toward right action if that worst case should arrive. Right. I like, there's several of my favorite authors say they use that as a writing technique. They take a character, they build them up, and they say, what's the worst thing I could do to this character? And then they put them through the story, and then the story is rich and beautiful, which I hope will be true for all of your processes of continuing to create cooperatives, whatever level of successful they are. I hope they are beautiful stories. So let's talk about tools. All right. So tools, they're from my perspective, having, you know, been and done this for a hot second, there are really only two things that every group has got to have in order to collaborate successfully. And that is clear and defined agreements for how you talk and how you decide. Right? If you have those two things, it's like a blacksmith with an anvil. You have everything you need to build everything else you need, right? So if you have clear and defined and consensed upon agreements on how you discuss things and how you make decisions, you being the group of people that cares and that is empowered to make decisions, right? Your core group, maybe your corporate group in your community, as long as that is written or like concretely agreed upon in a durable fashion, then you actually are well set up. If you don't have those things, not only is that going to be really challenging for you to get anything done in a smooth fashion, but it's going to be especially challenging when you are in a time of uncertainty and transition. Because what really characterizes a time of uncertainty and transition that's special inside a cooperative, especially a cooperative that's in an earlier stage or one that is more maturely member driven, where member voice really matters a lot, either because you're a core group starting it and you are 1/5 of the people trying to start it, or you're, you know, there is a now well formalized way that people have referenda and voting, et cetera, because you have a very mature co-op and you've got a lot to move and work with. Either way, the thing that's really special about co-ops is that everybody has agency to a certain degree, right? One member, one vote. And maybe it's not, you know, flat horizontal all of the way like it is in some worker collectives or other forms of collective, but you still have power. And what that does is that you really, everybody reverts to a version of their own logic, your own common sense, your own kind of family of origin story or best practices or whatever you want to call it. And if those aren't all the same, and if we're aiming for groups that are more diverse and inclusive so that we have more perspectives that we need to make better business decisions, et cetera, then they're not likely to be all the same. In a time of transition and uncertainty, all of your kind of like, oh, well, how has this worked before? That all comes out. And if it's not the same and you don't have a common language or a common framework that's already written down, then you're all going to be acting from a different place of logic and a different place of emotion before you even get into the hard discussion. And that's really, really challenging, right? You want to set yourself up to be as successful as possible by having as much on the same page, or at least the same book and the same chapter as possible before you get into the really hard stuff. So when you're in that hard stuff, right? Like here are the, if I like to think of, all right, we're being birthed, or we're rebirthing ourselves, or we're going through a major critical period of growth, or whatever it is. I like to kind of narrow in on, if you only have a little bit of energy, what things do you really need to have in order to actually navigate this successfully, right? And, you know, 2 things at the big level, how to talk and how to decide. But 1 level more granular for the people who like ops and systems in the room, like literally what should you write down and where, or what should you come to agreement and where, and what structure should you use and how. So I got kind of 5 that I want to leave you with today. 1 is the how we talk agreements, right? Oh yes, Victoria, wonderful. Minimum viable bureaucracy. That's a lovely way to put it. So that's fantastic. I love what everybody's language is for this. Me, I call it my emergency box. I'm like, what is the emergency box? What processes are in the emergency box? I know if we grab the emergency box and go, we got everything we need. Cool, this is them. So first is how we talk agreements, right? So this is very basic, but it's actually, as we just discussed, super critical, and especially when things are a little chaotic, because that's when things are more likely to disappear into a text thread that nobody else sees or is aware of, right? Or whatever. So when and where do you officially do the work of your collective? How is it continuously documented for visibility to the right people? And how does it guide future you when future you needs to consult the past? Why did we do that again? How did we come to that decision? Hold on, who said what? What was the vote that day, right? Have you balanced focus time with interpersonal bonding, time, kind of work with play so that you maximize your productivity? This is something that I think many of us community-oriented folks know intuitively, but is actually getting some solid data behind it, that if you just have all focus time and no fun time, the focus time suffers. And then what are your ground rules? How do you draw boundaries around what kind of things we discuss here, how we discuss them? Do we have ground rules about language? Do we have agreements about safety and space? Do we have ways that we want to articulate that to each other? And then how do we evolve those? So all of that kind of detail, when I say how we talk agreements, those are the basics of what I mean, right? It's like both like bureaucratically, where is the information? And then have you tuned your communication norms and structures to support the best version of your collaborative space possible? So are those written down, and are they alive, right? Like, how do you teach these to your new members, right? How do you bring these norms and structures into being, and then how do you reinforce them, right? Rituals and celebrations, really great way to do that. I always love a bureaucratic process that involves cake. How do we decide agreements? That's the second thing you need. So you need, how do we talk agreements and how do we decide agreements? My favorite one is the decision matrix. This is something you may have seen before. A lot of folks are using them nowadays and calling them this. We've used them forever, but folks are using this language to describe this. And it is literally a matrix. If you click on the example that I've got in the agenda, there's one from Ampled, a lovely worker-owned, artist-owned collective platform that's trying to be a competitor to things like Pandora and Spotify. And they open source their entire governance platform on the backside, so you can see everything they do. They've got a very decent decision matrix. You can get even more granular, but you don't necessarily need to. And that's something I really want to bring forward for all of this, all these tools that we're going to talk about. They are going to look very different from most examples that you've seen because they're going to look right for your group. And that's the most important thing. A lot of folks come with kind of like, this is the way you should do it, or this is the best process. Well, yeah, there are some common themes to how things can go very well, but the right way to do any of these things is the one that serves the needs, goals, and aspirations of your group and its members and its shared vision. So it's going to look different because you've seen one co-op, they're all different. So that's going to be important for you in terms of design, right? You want to learn from best practices, but it's going to be yours. It's going to be adapted to your context and your situation. So you're going to need to make sure you think that through. Like, what's your decision matrix? There's going to be some line items about like things that are very important to your community that other communities aren't going to be facing. And that's okay if those line items differ. As long as you've got like finances, operations, and like, do we have a business or not in the decision matrix, you're probably good. You can add more as you go. These are all alive things. They live and they breathe. And especially when you're in a time of transition, you hold them steady for chunks of time, and then you have moments when you revise them, which we'll talk about in a moment. We'll talk about that timeline in just a second. So a full matrix that outlines as many decisions as a group can think of and which constellations of stakeholders make that decision, and then using what process. Is this Robert's Rules majority vote? Is this a supermajority vote? What are the thresholds defined? Is this, etc.? Can you vote by proxy? All of those things, just put an agreement in it. Doesn't matter if you always follow it to the T, it's there so that when you disagree, you have it, right? And then speaking of when you disagree or when the way forward is uncertain, guiding statements or values. These are slightly different than what are our mission, vision, and values. These are really kind of if-then statements, or we prefer X over Y statements that help you when you are at a crossroads where there is a genuine choice and there isn't like a, well, we should do it or we should do it this way. If you actually just need to be guided. These are statements that that help articulate what your community wants and needs, or what solution set it's heading for to these problems, like why you're starting a food co-op or why your food co-op exists. It's going to be kind of different for everybody in this room, right? For some folks, it's food insecurity that they're addressing. For some folks, it's access to particular kinds of vegetables. For others, it's going to be relationships with farmers and local ecosystems. There's always going to be a slightly different version of that. Your community is going to create some form of these guiding statements, or it will have reasons and motivations that will help you create these. And those are really important because when you're at that fork in the road, that can help guide you through, well, here I am, I've looked at the decision matrix, I know who needs to make this decision, we just don't know how to make it in accordance with what we're trying to do. So those can really help guide the organization through that. They may change at different parts of your process, right? So for example, we prefer done over perfect. It can be a really great guiding statement in a startup phase, but not a great one once you're already done in the process of building and you need to conform to building code, for example, right? So these values and these, like, how do I make a decision? They're going to evolve over time. You notice a theme evolving over time. Maybe we should have a timeline where we actually proactively say, yo, shit's going to change. It's the only constant in life, right? So maybe we should plan for that and actually just make pre-scheduled touch points where we say, this is a moment where we as a group understand and commit to reviewing, potentially revising, and renewing all of these different ways that we make decisions. When you're at a time of rapid transition, that's really important to do. I generally don't advise folks do this more frequently than 3 months and not less frequently than 2 years. So somewhere in the sweet spot of that is a good amount of cadence for you to be actually really taking a look at your stuff. If things are moving really, really rapidly, maybe you're just going to be in it for a minute and then you come and it's actually, hey, what did we do? We do a retrospective because things got a little crazy there for a second. We're going to learn for that, codify the best, make rules against the worst, and then move forward. But that's a really important moment. And the pre-agreed upon is super critical because then it's not, we're in crisis and suddenly we need to decide whether or not the rules are serving us. You do not want to be deciding about whether or not the rules are serving you when you're already in crisis, if you can at all avoid it. We'll talk about what to do when you can't avoid it in just a second. But really you want to make sure that these structures, these norms, these decision agreements, these value statements, that they're always reflecting somewhere near your kind of best guess at what's needed to get you all where you're trying to go together in the way that you're trying to get there, right? And so for example, one I'll just share, if you're having a GM join your core crew, revising them before they join, right before, and then 1 to 6 months after they join might be a good idea with a kind of defined time window in there of maybe a minimum of a month, maybe anywhere from 3 to 6 to, I've seen some co-ops have it be up to 18 months, where you're kind of considered in transition and coming in. And your wisdom is very welcome, but we're not going to revise how we do things yet because fresh eyes are important, but also you just got here, right? So there's that thinking about those things when you're thinking about a timeline is really helpful. Now, all that beautiful stuff said, there's a lot of great planning. That's a lot of stuff that takes time and energy. If you're in startup phase, time and energy at a premium. Sometimes you don't have time to do all of that, or sometimes you give your best, but you haven't actually, your best doesn't include the time to make all of these tools as well as you'd like. Or you have all the tools, you're using them, and it still goes sideways. That's going to happen sometimes. And we're going to have to plan for that if we want this to actually go well, because challenge and transition and things not going smoothly, people not going smoothly, that's just about as normal as anything. That's probably to be expected. And so if we're expecting that, and especially if we're in a complex community-driven situation like this, we really should expect it, actually. And we can recognize as well that it can become a strength, actually, for the project if we do a little bit of designing for it. We just have some ways that we say, okay, we're going to do all of our best, and if shit happens, or if and when shit happens, here's how we're also going to deal with that. I just like to tell groups, and this is something that I've seen in some pretty serious and high-level situations where there were legal allegations involved. I've seen groups that, to put it colloquially, fuck up and then unfuck up together are actually much more strong in terms of business resiliency, in terms of interpersonal relationships, in terms of productivity than groups that have never fucked up before. So having things go sideways can actually be a gift if you have a way to grab it, harness it as a group, right? Like I'm looking at the folks who are in their rebirth process right now. There is a very possible world in which you come out of that rebirth process even stronger than you would have ever been, right? And so how do we do that? Well, there's a lot of different ways. Having these different tools that we've already talked about as placeholders or as goals to harvest or put lessons into from that process, that's one way. Another really great way is a concept from the kid community that I like to bring in here into the business world because it's extremely useful. The concept of aftercare. So I've seen this work very effectively in collectively organized or member-driven or member-owned groups, especially because it's an agreement by all parties to kind of hold each other and the relationships and the collaboration in kindness, in curiosity, and a shared commitment to really kind of show up for each other and the shared goal in a crisis until we are okay again. So this is critical because what it really does, it also includes kind of permission to explore and co-create what that process of showing up looks like, kind of in concrete detail, in whatever way is the most consensual and supportive of your shared goals. And it's agreed upon before you get into the work together. So what that looks like in practice is, say I'm in a startup. I'm in a startup of 6 other people. We're the core board. We are forming, we're gathering a community, we're gathering shareholders, we're looking at financing. And we understand that we're probably going to have some stuff come up for us and members of our community around class and the traumas that various members of our community have around how class has shown up and poverty has shown up in their lives. We can commit to each other, be like, look, we know that we're probably going to stumble on how we view money and how our community views money. We're probably going to make some PR mistakes when we're asking for money. We're probably going to make some, hurt each other's feelings a little bit when we're talking about what is enough and what a capital reserve should be, etc. This is an actual example. So since we know that that's likely to happen, what we're going to do is just commit to each other that if that happens, we're going to navigate a way interpersonally and as a collective, we're going to commit time and energy to navigating toward finding a solution or solving that friction or hearing each other better until everybody who's involved says, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm okay. We're ready to move forward. And if you just make that commitment and put a few ideas as to what process for that might look like, just in some intentional statements, then what you've done is you've created a collective safety net for the interpersonal components of your collective work. And that's ultimately, especially in startup phase, but in growth phase as well, whoever that core group is, and however that core group relates to a larger membership, if there's a safety net there for knowing that if stuff goes sideways, there's gonna be it is a possible path back toward collaboration, back toward collective action, back toward knowing that your membership means something here, knowing that your operations are going to be smooth here, right? If there's just a little bit of a safety net, A, you need it less, and B, it's there. And it's there when you need it. And I've seen some profound organization like this when we talk about in the world, like there's a couple of studies that have been done over this, but we talk about in the world collective businesses. So, for example, cooperatively owned enterprise is somewhere around 35% more likely to succeed and not fail than comparable enterprises in similar industries in terms of size and revenue, et cetera. Part of that secret sauce is the collective putting energy into things like this. So that when you're in a time when resilience really matters, you've got this. This is an ingredient in resilience. All of these 4 to 5 tools I've given you are ingredients in resilience, but this is the one where you're like, we've done our best and shit still happens, and we've got a plan for that too, right? So things like that, that's how I like to be thinking and planning when I'm thinking about times of transition are coming or uncertainty is here, or we know we're in a space that requires a lot of different ways of navigating. I like to think about these things and I like to think in these ways to try and say, okay, how am I setting myself up for as much success as possible? And then getting out of our own way to go do the work, right? So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. I'm gonna pause, sip some tea. Questions, clarifications, anything coming out that you're like, what do you actually mean by that? Or I saw this word and I don't get it, or anything else before we take a moment and break into discussions to just put some of this knowledge into action real quick. Hydration. Okay. Yeah. And I do tend to speak kind of fast because I'm pretty passionate. It's one of my growing edges. So if you miss anything because I was burbling, because I got excited, like ain't no shame in asking me to repeat. I know it's a growing edge for me. Boy, do I work on it every day, and I'm going to be working on it until the day I die, probably. Okay, fantastic. All right, if things come up, drop them in the chat, and more importantly, discuss with your colleagues and your comrades in this call. So what I would love to do now, and let me just see how many humans we've actually got now. I don't think I can see all your glorious faces. Faye, how many humans do we have?
There are 18 people, including you and me.
Awesome.
So
all right.
16 participants.
Fantastic. Then what would be lovely is let's do 4 groups of like 3 to 4-ish each. I'll hang out in the main group so that folks can call me into the group if you're like, yo, we need an idea, or can you clarify something for me? And I'm going to ask everyone to kind of take a look at the agenda and scroll on down. We're going to do 4 groups, so I'll go ahead and delete this 5th group here. And you'll see that in the small group discussion section of the agenda, I've actually put a place for us to put our thoughts so that every group that's doing their own thing can also benefit from the wisdom of the other groups that are doing their thing. So I invite you, when you break into your group, to elect or voluntold a scribe to go ahead and take some notes for your group. And what I would love for us to do in these small groups for the next 10 to 15 minutes, I think let's take the full 15, and then we'll just read asynchronously as we close. I would love folks to pick a context, a situation, or a theme of a situation. Maybe it's one that you're living through, maybe it's one that you're afraid you're going to have to face, maybe it's a hypothetical that's really intriguing, and a tool or a structure from the ones that we discussed or other ones that you've seen work that might help you navigate it, and just kind of think through that as a group, right? And identify and record any kind of insights or key themes you might have, or my favorite, any open questions that you kind of think through or discover in thinking through that context. So that's kind of what I want us to do. Break in. Again, I'll hang out in the main room, and there's a way for you to be like, call for help if you want me to pop in, or if you just want to say hi and get some additional support. I'll also probably jump around a little bit, maybe come say hi if I can, and listen in on your glorious conversations. But that's what we're going to do for the next 10-ish minutes. What are we at? Oh, okay, yeah, 10, maybe 12 to 15 minutes. We'll check in. And see,
And I can send a note to folks giving you a 60-second warning too, so you'll know when you need to wrap up your conversation. So people will be assigned to random groups, is that right?
Yep.
Okay,
random.
Great. I am going to open 4 rooms.
Okay.
You are all being invited. If you aren't quite sure how to accept a room, just hang here and we can give you instructions.
Yay. All right. See y'all soon.
All right, good.
Fantastic.
Everyone knows how to do these things.
It's great. We got a lot of training under our belts. Are folks roughly balanced in number in the room?
Yeah, there's 3 in room 1, 4, 4, and 3.
Great. All right.
Yes. All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
So when do you want to bring folks back? About 5 minutes too?
How much time do you need for the outro? A couple minutes, or are you already
Like
good?
2, yeah, like 2 minutes, 2, 3
Okay.
minutes.
Yeah, let's bring them back at like 7 till.
Okay, great. That
so
sounds
that we
good.
can do, yeah, just a little bit of checkout.
Okay.
And that still gives us a good time.
Great.
All right. I'm going to hang out here for just a minute, see if anybody raises their hand, and then I might take a tour through groups.
Cool.
So we'll see.
Yeah, sounds good. I might pop around too.
Hello, welcome back.
Oh, apparently I hit the wrong button.
It always
Left
happens.
the
Do you want to
group
go
too
back
early.
in?
Okay, put me back in quick.
Go for it. I've totally
I think
done
group 4.
Can you toss
Oh,
her?
goodness. Yes, you can just join again.
that. You have to click the
I-
button at the bottom of your
Yeah, I can't reassign you. You just have to hit join.
Oh, it might not. Zoom changed their opinions about whether or not that was a thing recently. It may be possible. It may not be.
Well, you only
Oh.
have 20 seconds left anyways. Well, sorry.
They're probably wondering where I went.
Don't worry.
Darn it.
They'll join you. They'll join you momentarily.
They will.
Excellent. I love seeing these notes happen in real time. It's such fun seeing all the
Awesome.
people's ideas coming together.
Said, oh, boo. Okay.
Oh, here we go. Oh, welcome back, everyone. I hope I didn't catch you in the middle of a word, but I might have. I don't know if anybody is old enough or sees enough interesting movies to think of that vaudevillian hook that comes out and yanks you off stage. I always feel like when I bring people back into a room, I'm like, welcome back, semi-consensually. Hi. It's been a real pleasure to see these wonderful notes happening in real time with some juicy ideas in here. We have about 6 minutes left. And I just wanted to make space, pass the mic for a hot second. Does anybody have something really juicy or a highlight or a really kind of compelling open question that arose in your group that you just want to voice to the room beyond where it's captured in your notes? Anyone want
So
Take it
yeah, I apologize that I did not write it in the document. I was just taking notes in a Word doc, and I see somebody is very actively writing in our group. So I'm in group 1.
excellent.
Can I get my other fellow group members just to introduce themselves?
Let's
Yeah.
if
Never
anybody
mind.
wants to go
Never
ahead.
mind. I'll just
Okay.
say that we had a really interesting discussion, and one of the things that I thought was the problem that we really talked about was transitioning from a volunteer-based organization to a GM.
Excellent. Was there any particular highlight from that discussion that you want to share?
The idea of, like, you know, you've got these moving from an outreach coordinator and a project manager, there's just such a different job than you would have for a GM, right? That there's all of these ideas of who's responsible for the supervisor, what do, you know, how do you transition from that very different role of a volunteer-based organization to an organization with an employee?
Yeah, I love that not just logistical and operational changes, but like legal changes, right? Like this, we're subject to labor law suddenly, right? And there's a whole bunch of different levels of change and transition in there that I just heard you bring forward. Thank you so much, Lisa. And feel free to just drop what you wrote in your Google, in whatever Word doc you were taking, into the shared doc so folks can learn from your wisdom. I'm also going to keep this an open and editable doc for the rest, like probably another 24 hours at least. So folks, feel free to drop things in, copy, paste, grab a copy for yourself so that you can make sure you keep this wisdom with you and growing. Anyone else want to grab the mic for a hot second, share anything else? I can uplift a few things that I'm seeing in the document, but I would love to pass the mic to one more voice if anybody has something to share.
I think for us, it was, and I added a few words as soon as we got Vaudevillian yanked off the stage. I'm in group 2, and Opal was talking about, for her, a lot of turnover in their board, and it made me think of some of the reasons being and how hard they were all working and everyone doing everything, and I can mirror that. And then we have a lack of energy, and then we have burnout. You're like, you know, I just can't do this anymore. And that, I think that's been some for us too. I'll admit I feel it.
Yeah.
I feel it a lot.
That's very, very real. Yeah, it takes, when you're manifesting something from nothing, or when you're, you know, moving and shaking and transitioning, it's energy, it's literal time and energy. And I like to say love and intention are infinite, time is not. And capacity is not either. And what do you do with that? And how do you navigate through that? And how do you try and have some solutions and some structures for that? I love some of the things I see there: staggered tenures, annual board retreats, with some education, some information. I might add some celebration. because there's nothing that fills our cup faster than getting to laugh. And like there's some solid neuroscience behind that actually as well. So again, with the fun being productive, like yes, bring it in as a theme. Okay, these are fantastic. I'm going to wind us down now, and I'm just going to invite you to, as my parting gift for a structure that I have often in the communication norms or the how we talk agreements of groups that I work with and groups that I've been a part of, is a checkout. We opened with a check-in, and a checkout is actually a super important way to navigate continuous burnout, because you're always working and always doing things. A checkout is a way to say, and we're done now, and we're going to move on to other things. We're going to put that hat back on the shelf for the next chunk of time, and we're going to learn from it, harvest, and then move on. And so in the chat, if I could just invite you to do this, and I invite you to take this as a tool in a meeting. If you have less than 15 people, it takes literally a minute and a half, and share for you the 2 words. The first word being something that you learned today, and then comma, how you feel right now, in 2 words only. So first word is something you learned. Second word, how you feel right now. Sheila coming in strong with aftercare, comma, overwhelmed. Thank you for that. I invite y'all to go ahead and put those in as I pass the mic back to Faye for our closing. And then just in last, I will make sure you see it in the doc, but I'll drop it in the chat as well. How to get a hold of me. If this conversation has been interesting, if you want to continue, if you would some support, if you just want to talk shop, because I'm really into that, reach out. I would absolutely love to talk co-op shop with you. And I will drop my email in there. And with that, Faye, the mic for you to close us out.
Thank you so much, Sassy. Thank you for this. This was a whirlwind. I learned so much, and I'm excited to dig into this document again later myself. I really want to thank you all for being here tonight as well. And I hope that you will attend some other FCI Lives. So this was the second session in a 2-week series. So coming up this week, we have 2 sessions a day, Monday through Thursday, this week and next. On the screen, you can see a couple of sessions that are coming up tomorrow, and on Wednesday, some more around governance if you want to keep digging in there. You can check out all of the different sessions on fci.coop. If you want to go look at our website, it's not too late to register. So you can keep checking out the sessions and register for more as you would like to take a look. And then I just want to round out by once again thanking Sassy for speaking tonight, thanking you all for being here, and thank you to all of the sponsors who help make FCI Live possible. And with that, I'm going to end the recording and the sharing.